Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of The Most Accurate Podcast. I am your host, Addison Hayes, joined as always by one of the most accurate rankers in the entire fantasy football community, John Paulson. John, how are we doing on this fine Thursday morning?
Welcome to the Bipocalypse. 6 teams on bye. This might be the most important Sneaky Starts podcast article of the year. Maybe you can save your season. Maybe you can save your week. Maybe not. Maybe we'll have bad picks, but it's going to be fun nonetheless.
Yeah, not only is it like the most teams on bye, but they're heavily impactful teams on bye. Like the Lions are out this week, the Jaguars, the Raiders, the Cardinals, the Rams, Seahawks. Like there are some pretty major fantasy contributors and other kind of secondary pieces that were good starts on a week-to-week basis that you just don't have. Lineups sucked for me setting them earlier this morning before the Thursday night game tonight. So, yeah, this is definitely going to be one we got to step up for, especially after last week. We sucked last week. I'm just going to call it how it is. We did not do well last week with our sneaky starts. So, hopefully we can come back super strong this week for you guys, especially with all of the bye weeks this week. So, we have 2 players at all 4 positions, so 8 total, 1 for each of us. That we consider to be sneaky starts this week that, again, you don't have to try to force into your lineup if you have better plays, but some of you may not have better options out there, and we want to give you guys the confidence to throw these guys in your starting lineup. So, John, why don't you kick us off with your quarterback sneaky start for week 8?
Yeah, I tried to go fringy, possibly on the waiver wire type plays or guys that are on your bench and you're not so sure whether or not you should start them this week. So, Aaron Rodgers is, out there in a lot of waiver wires, 12-team leagues because, the quarterback position is fairly deep. And he's starting to pick up some steam here. He's got a matchup. I think he's going to be extremely motivated to play against the Packers. The Packers have shown some vulnerability on the road this year defensively. I think they have been significantly better at home. They've given up 230 to 31 yards, 1.67 touchdowns to enemy quarterbacks this season. Rodgers has 6 touchdowns in his last 2 games. He had 4 against the Bengals last week. In 3 road games, the Packers have yielded 18.2 fantasy points per game, and that includes 31 to Dak Prescott, 19.8 last week to Jacoby Brissett. And the reason the average is low is because they did a pretty good job against Joe Flacco in Cleveland with that pretty terrible Cleveland passing game. So this could be given the defensive struggles of the Steelers, which maybe you could speak to that, Addison, being a fan. This is definitely a sneaky shootout type game on Sunday night.
Yes, I think it definitely can get to being a shootout type of game, and especially if the Packers kind of hold down the Jalen Warren specifically. I'll say the rushing attack of Pittsburgh, but really that's just Jalen Warren that I think that in order to move the ball, Pittsburgh's going to have to throw a little bit more. And Rodgers has looked pretty solid. I'm personally starting to get a little bit of hope that the Steelers might actually be somewhat of a contender in the AFC. I'm probably going to not have that hope in about 4 or 5 weeks because I think our stretch of games is pretty rough here, especially with Baltimore getting healthy. But as a personal Steelers fan, I'm excited for this Pittsburgh Steelers team. And as you mentioned, I think with the revenge factor for Rodgers against the Packers, I think that could be a very fun Sunday night game. So I like the call a lot. I also was trying to look for some waiver wire-y kind of players. I debated. I was first initially looking at Tyrod Taylor, but it sounds like he's not going to even play this week. So I don't even know who the Jets' third-string quarterback is if they decide to bench Justin Fields again, but it sounds like Tyrod's not going to play. It would have been a good matchup against the Bengals. Marcus Mariota, I debated as well, but they get the Kansas City Chiefs on Monday night. I wasn't really sure how I felt about that one, but I do think that he could be a sneaky start with his rushing ability if you just really, really need somebody. And Spencer Rattler, I'll shout out as my other option that I was debating against the Buccaneers at home. But the player that I initially that I ended up going with is Bo Nix, who may or may not have been on waivers this week after not really doing all that well for most of the season this year, and then not even doing well for, I'll say, 80% of the Giants game as well. Really, that final 5 minutes was everything that Bo Nix needed for production. So I don't know if this is really a super sneaky one, but Bo Nix has not been a very consistent player this year. He's actually been under 18 fantasy points in 4 out of his 7 games played. But he now gets a Dallas Cowboys defense at home that, especially if he needs to throw more to keep up with the Cowboys offense and Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, Javonte Williams. I think that this is a good opportunity for Bo Nix, again, in a bipocalypse and with not a lot of other great waiver wire options out there besides Aaron Rodgers. If you already had Bo Nix or you were able to pick him up this week after his performance against the Giants, I think he's a pretty solid start.
I didn't write him up. But I like the call. I've got him ranked pretty high. I believe he's in my top 6. Yeah, I've got him at 5 this week against Dallas. He was quarterback 13 heading into last week, but his on a per game basis, he was down at QB 21. So like you said, he's been a little bit spotty, 16.2. This is obviously just a great matchup for him and for any quarterback, really. The Cowboys have been really stinky against the pass. And one other name I was thinking about was Joe Flacco against the Jets. Just seems like, the Joe Flacco that we saw in previous seasons where he was throwing for like 250 to 280 consistently with a couple touchdowns and just kind of chucking it. We didn't really see that in Cleveland. But I think it was a lack of weapons issue more so, because now we're seeing it with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and a pretty bad Bengals defense. The defense might have played a factor too, with the Browns having a pretty good defense. Now we're getting like the Joe Flacco that we've sort of seen. So I'm starting him in an FFPC league where I'm banged up at the quarterback and need a start.
I like that call a lot. I think Cleveland. Getting out of Cleveland solves a lot of issues for a lot of different players. So I think that's what we're seeing here with Joe Flacco once again. So let's move on to the tight end position. Honestly, this is the position that I've had the most difficulty with in recent weeks, but especially this week, that I just wasn't entirely sure where to go. I like my player. I also like your player a lot. So why don't you hit us with your sneaky start for the tight end position?
Yeah, and just to circle back on a second on Tyrod Taylor, I'm not seeing that he's out. I'm seeing he's limited with a knee injury on Wednesday, so I'm going to stay on top of that. If you have any further data on that or information, let me know. Dalton Schultz is my pick. He's also battling some injuries, but with what's going on with Nico Collins, he's got a concussion. Usually when a player gets concussed in week X, they have to sit week X plus 1. There are times when it doesn't take a full week to get back, but 9 times out of 10, 19 times out of 20, they have to sit at least 1 week. And what that does is it opens up a lot of targets for a player like Dalton Schultz. He had 10 targets, 9 catches last week, 98 yards. When they were, really healthy at receiver, he's just not really a big part of the offense. But when they're this banged up, they're down Christian Kirk as well. So we've got to keep an eye on Kirk's status. They're down Nico. I mean, you're getting into the nitty gritty here with a couple of rookie receivers and Xavier Hutchinson, I think. So Dalton Schultz, pretty solid option. San Francisco, 21st in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position. They've given up 43 plus yards to 5 different tight ends this season already, and I just think his role is going to have to be there. He's got to see 7 to 10 targets with C.J. Stroud. Yeah,
very reminiscent of what he did this past week. I debated Jalen Noel for all the same reasons that you listed out for my wide receiver sneaky start. But I just given the fact that he's a rookie and we haven't seen a whole lot out of him, Dalton Schultz definitely has that body of work historically, both with the Texans and the Dallas Cowboys, that you would trust his involvement in his production a little bit more, assuming that he is heavily involved without Nico or Christian Kirk this week. So I like it a lot. My tight end sneaky start this week is Juwan Johnson. He finally returned to production last week. He had 5 catches for 79 yards on 7 targets after slumping for pretty much 3 weeks there from weeks 4, 5, and 6. I do wonder if part of the reason for that slump was due to an ankle injury that he was dealing with that he kind of picked up in week 5. He did not practice week 5 on Wednesday, then was limited on Thursday, Friday, to where he was questionable going into that week. Didn't have a great week. And then week 6 was limited that whole entire week pretty much, and then did not have another good game. But then week 7, completely off the injury report last week and was good for production. Now, I say all that, but Juwan Johnson had a limited practice Wednesday with a neck injury. So I don't know what's going on completely there. I know Chris Olave was also out, but I think he's expected to play. But if Chris Olave were to be hampered at all, or perhaps inactive if his injury were to get worse, and with the fact that Juwan Johnson, who might be getting healthier from that ankle injury from the past couple of weeks, could be more heavily involved like he was at the start of the season. He also plays the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are 23rd in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the tight end position. They've allowed multiple 50-plus yard games to tight ends, multiple 2-plus touchdown games to tight ends, with A.J. Barner and Dallas Goedert getting them for 2 touchdowns in the same game. So I think that this could be a very good matchup where, especially as New Orleans has to run a lot of plays, throw a lot of passes to keep up with opposing teams, Juwan Johnson could be the player that he was to start the season once again now.
I like it. I didn't write him up, but he absolutely fits the bill of a sneaky start. Got him ranked tight end 16. As you mentioned, pretty good matchup. And the Buccaneers tend to be in a high-scoring game. They only had like 9 points last week against Detroit, which was kind of weird. But, I think this is going to be a higher-scoring game for them, certainly, and that's going to lead to some throws for the Saints in all likelihood. I think your point about his health is pretty key there. Another dart throw I just want to mention is Noah Fant. Like, I don't see really anybody talking about Noah Fant right now. Maybe it's just, he was talked about years ago and has burned so many people that everybody's just sort of just writing him off as a 1-week wonder or whatever. But he did have a touchdown last week, 4 for 44. He joined I don't know if he joined it or is rejoining it or doing it again, which level jacket he has in the 4 for 44 club. But that's when you catch 4 passes for 44 yards. If anybody is not familiar with the 4 for 44 club. Mike Gesicki on IR. So Fant's snaps jumped to 68%. We now have Joe Flacco at quarterback for this, for the same reasons we discussed, liking Jamar Chase more and T. Higgins more with Flacco at quarterback. The same goes for Fant. And the Jets allowing 6.2 catches for 48.5 yards and a touchdown. So giving you extra sneaky starts this week because it's such an important week.
That was his first 4 for 44 game. He had 4 for 43 in a game last year, but this is his first 4 for 44.
He tried last year.
He did. All right, so moving on to the running back position, then you and I had a little back and forth on this one, but your player was my backup, and you gave me my initial player. So I like both of these calls a lot. Why don't you hit us with?
We just swapped them. Okay, I'm going to go with J.K. Dobbins. I also like your pick, but Dobbins just kind of cruising there as an RB2 pretty much every week. It helps when he catches or scores a touchdown. Doesn't always, but he's been a steady workhorse for the Broncos. He's averaging 5 yards per carry. He's got at least 14 rush attempts in 6 of 7 games this year. And this is a really, really good matchup against the Dallas team that has struggled pretty much in all facets of defense. They've given up an average of 103.4 rushing yards and 0.71 touchdowns per game to opposing backfield. So not necessarily going to score a touchdown, but he should have a pretty big yardage day, especially for him. They've given up in the recent weeks 183 rushing yards to Rico Dowdle. They gave up 113 to Breece Hall. To Josh Jacobs, they yielded 86 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, and that's all since week 4. So I like Dobbins, and I also, just to throw in a prop pick here, his line is 66.5, which he has cleared in 5 of the last 6. Plus, given the matchup against Dallas and the 103 they've given up on average, I just feel like that's a pretty good play.
Yep. Yeah, as I mentioned, he was my secondary option that was on my short list as I was working on my players for this video. And I wonder if people's confidence in him has wavered a little bit. He hasn't been all that good in the last 2 weeks, 14 for 40, then 14 for 81. So he hasn't had 10 fantasy points in 2 weeks after having 10 fantasy points minimum the first 5 weeks of the season. So I'm wondering if people's confidence is wavering a little bit, but it's a phenomenal matchup. And Dobbins is still very much the lead back over RJ Harvey. as of right now. So I think I would be starting him in every single league that I can get him into my lineup. My running back sneaky start. This is like the definition of sneaky. I felt so good about it until I saw you type his name in, which made me feel good, even more, even better about my thoughts on this. But then I was like, dang it, you stole it from me. But you let me have this one. It is Tyler Allgeier, the technically backup running back for the Atlanta Falcons behind Bijan Robinson, who draws a Miami Dolphins defense this year, who are somehow 27th in adjusted fantasy points allowed. I don't know how they're not lower than that. That there are somehow worse defenses against the run than the Miami Dolphins. I would think that they are like 35th or 36th in rushing defense this year, which I don't know how that would be possible with 32 teams, but their rushing defense is awful. So that is, point number one for why we want to be playing Tyler Allgeier. But point number two, Falcons are 3-3 this year. And in their 3 wins, Allgeier averages 53 yards and 1 touchdown on 14 carries. So assuming that the Falcons win this game against the Dolphins, and with how bad their run defense is, we would expect not only Bijan Robinson to absolutely dump on them, but Bijan Robinson is not a sneaky start. Tyler Allgeier is a sneaky start, and he should also be able to kind of dump on the Dolphins defense, especially if Atlanta, if they're up big at the end of the game, they decide to sit Bijan Robinson, and maybe he gets an extra drive or two as the lone back to kind of ice that game away. We could see some really good production out of Tyler Allgeier that is a super sneaky spot start RB2 if you need it due to bye weeks or injuries.
Yeah, I was just looking at my phone to see what the line was for his rushing yards, 42.5. I mentioned that to Connor Allen yesterday that I like that. I took it at Prize Picks in a couple plays. This just sets up for him to see at least 10 carries if it goes to script. I mean, Atlanta's playing well. The game's at home. Miami's like a train wreck. So if they get up 7 to 10, 14 points, they're not going to want to run Bijan in the second half as much. I still like Bijan, obviously, because the matchup's great, and they might get into a competitive game. And if they are ahead by that much, he's probably scored. But this just sets up as a high-touch game for him, for Allgeier. We've seen him. He's talented. He's like one of the premier attrition backs like you want to have on your roster in case there is any sort of injury to Robinson. But you just look at the Dolphins. You mentioned their rush defense. They have given up the most rushing yards to running backs, 898 through 7 games. They are third in fantasy points allowed to raw fantasy points allowed to running backs per game. They've given up 169.6 total yards and 0.85 touchdowns on average to the position. So this is just a really good matchup, I think, for Allgeier, especially if it goes to script. It might not, but it might. The other player I just wanted to throw out there, Brashard Smith. If you're really desperate, and I know a lot of fantasy managers are going to be desperate this week to get somebody out there that might do well. It does appear that Smith has overtaken Kareem Hunt, at least he did last week, kind of getting him into that Jerick McKinnon role, which was really valuable. If you remember McKinnon's run at times for the Chiefs, Pacheco is not as entrenched as he was maybe in previous years, although Pacheco looked better last week as well. I think both of them are startable this week against Washington if the Chiefs stick with what they did last week and kind of relegate Kareem Hunt to the RB3 role.
I did have Isaiah Pacheco on my kind of short list as well. That some people have even asked me. This is up to even today. I answered a question in the comment section on YouTube. Should I pick up Isaiah Pacheco off of waivers? And I'm like, yeah, you probably should. So I think Isaiah Pacheco is starting to turn a corner as being like the more focal workhorse for the Chiefs right now. And they are relegating Kareem Hunt down, and that is also beneficial for Brashard Smith, especially in the PPR, the receiving game for PPR fantasy leagues. So I'd like both Pacheco and Brashard Smith. And I will never forget the Jerick McKinnon run because he won me a fantasy league at the end of that year. So thank you, Jerick McKinnon, for your role on the Chiefs. On to the wide receiver position, then the last one. John, why don't you finish us off with your wide receiver sneaky start?
Yeah, there are quite a few interesting receivers this week. I like your pick. I'm not going to spoil it. I know you get mad when I spoil it. You mentioned Jalen Noel earlier. He's absolutely. I mean, it's not a great matchup for him, but he's going to see a spike in snaps and targets, very likely. I'm still liking Alec Pierce. You know, I wrote him up last week. Josh Downs looks like he's back, perhaps this week, but Pierce has been pretty good even with Downs in the lineup. He's playing more snaps than Downs and has been. You know, he's a big kind of a bigger play guy. He had 98 yards last week on 10 targets. So anyway, to get to my picks, I'm going with my Packers. I'm going with Romeo Doubs, Matthew Golden. We have a situation with the Packers in a great matchup against Pittsburgh. You know, sorry to say it, but the Steelers are 30th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position. If there's something that's going to keep them from being a contender, it's going to be the defense. They got to get the especially the pass defense sorted out. But if you look at the Packers, you know, I think this is a sneaky shootout game. It's prime time. I think tension's going to be high. Everybody's going to be amped up. There should be some scoring. I don't think it's going to be one of these weirdly low scoring games unless the Packer defense like really shows up on the road, which they might. But Dontavian Wicks left last week with a calf injury. He was playing through an ankle injury. He looks doubtful to questionable for this week. So you've got Malik Heath right now as a wide receiver 3, although it does appear that Christian Watson might come back this week. And if he does, I don't think it's going to lead to reduced snaps for Dobbs or Matthew Golden because of just this, you know, the length of his recovery and, you know, him coming in. I think he's just going to come in and play 20-30% of the snaps, run a few routes, maybe do some deep stuff. But they're not going to be leaning on him to do too much when they've got Dobbs, and Golden now is, you know, basically has a half season under his belt. So I think they're both startable. I have more confidence in Dobbs just because he's, you know, the red zone threat for them. Now he doesn't get the look every single week, but he had the 3 touchdown game against Dallas. He's been consistently part of the red zone game plan during his career. Really good in tight spaces and contested catches. So I think that he's a threat for a 2 touchdown game. I don't want to, you know, promise that, but he is a threat for it, as we saw against the Cowboys. And I think Golden, he was on a nice trajectory until this last game against the Cardinals. I don't know, you know, what happened. He only ended up with 4 targets. They did not run him. You usually give him a carry or 2. So that was kind of a weird game for him, given the trajectory he's been on. I think he gets back into the flow, back into the offense, especially with Wicks probably out.
I have Romeo Doubs currently in a starting lineup on one of my redraft leagues right now. So I definitely agree with that call. And Golden, I mean, we're still waiting for that first touchdown. So if you can go and call your shot on that game for him to get his first touchdown, that might be the kind of breakout week. And he certainly has a really good matchup this week against the Steelers to do it. Especially if Jordan Love kind of feels like he needs to, you know, have not revenge against Aaron Rodgers, but like show Green Bay and everybody like why he is the next guy. And we should be forgetting about Aaron Rodgers there. But my wide receiver sneaky start is Tez Johnson, who seems to be the de facto wide receiver 2 for the Buccaneers right now. Mike Evans, of course, on IR. Chris Godwin is still unavailable. So we've kind of had this thing with maybe Sterling Shepard is a good play. We really like Cade Otton at the tight end position. Rashad White can, you know, catch a few passes out of the backfield because Bucky Irving's going to be inactive again this week. But Tez Johnson has kind of come on over the past couple of weeks to being a very kind of quality role player for Baker Mayfield. And with this kind of increased workload, I think that he could be very, very productive. And if you look at, they play the New Orleans Saints this week, who in adjusted fantasy points allowed, they are 14th. So it's not like a tremendous matchup, and they are slightly above average against the position. But if you look at how they've been beaten, they gave up a 45-yard touchdown to Juwan Jennings in week 2. That was with Ricky Pearsall healthy as well. So, you know, you could argue that Jennings was more of the wide receiver 2 that week. In week 3, Jackson Smith and Jigba got him for a big game, but he's been doing that to everybody. But Torrey Horton also scored a touchdown that week behind JSN. Khalil Shakir was 5 for 70 and a touchdown. Kayshon Boutte had 5 for 93 and 2, including 1 long touchdown there. And then Demario Douglas also had a long touchdown against New Orleans Saints in that Patriots game. So I think that, Tez Johnson is a pretty solid start this week. He has had chances to make big plays in the past that he's taken advantage of. And I think he'll have more chances to make big plays this week as kind of that wide receiver 2 across from Emeka Egbuka. If he sees, 6, 7, 8 targets this week, I wouldn't be surprised. And if he does, I think he's a pretty solid start against the Saints. I'll also throw out, I have an interest in figuring out if there could be a relevant Giants wide receiver behind Wan'Dale Robinson this week. They play the Philadelphia Eagles. Wan'Dale, I think, is a good start. But I've also been seeing that basically if you can call your shot on whoever's not going to get covered by Quinyon Mitchell and gets, Keely Ringo, or I don't know if Adoree Jackson's playing this week because he got hurt last week, but whoever's the opposite wide receiver could be a decent start as well against the Eagles. And Lil Jordan Humphrey had 4 for 55 against them with a couple of missed touchdown opportunities in that Thursday night game 2 weeks ago with the Giants won. Darius Slayton, I think, might be back this week, so you might want to consider playing Slayton, or maybe if you think that Slayton's going to get Quinyon Mitchell, maybe that makes Lil Jordan Humphrey a desperation kind of play. All that to say, I think Wan'Dale's a really good start as well. And if you wanted to try to call your shot on the other one between Slayton and Lil Jordan, I don't think that is a terrible decision if you're that desperate.
Yeah, Slayton might be on waiver wires. I picked him up in my long-time league for $1, for $1. So if he can get healthy, might have something going there with the Giants. Tez Johnson, I wrote him and Sterling Shepard up. I think Shepard's like a PPR play. He just doesn't have the touchdown upside as Tez Johnson does. We've seen Johnson with 2 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. He had 4 for 59 3 weeks ago in 36% of the snaps. Then he earned some more playing time due to the injuries and stuff. He had 1 for 45 and a touchdown against the 49ers in 72% of snaps. And then against Detroit, 4 for 58 and a touchdown on 9 targets in 68% of the snaps. And as you mentioned, the matchup is middling, but you've got Baker, who's throws a lot of, for a lot of yards and touchdowns. They're just down bad at receiver. So he's going to play 60, 70, 80% of the snaps. And he should, if he's getting 9 targets again, you're in great shape. But if he's getting 6 or 7, you're probably in good shape. And I also like the 44.5 number on him, Bleacher Nation Fantasy. He's surpassed that in 3 straight games. So trending very well in that direction as well.
All it takes is one catch for him, as we've already seen, and especially in an increased role, he could definitely get there. So those are our sneaky starts for the week. 2 players at every single position: Aaron Rodgers, Bo Nix, Dalton Schultz, Juwan Johnson, J.K. Dobbins, Tyler Allgeier, Romeo Doubs, and Matthew Golden, and then Tez Johnson, plus a number of alternative options at those positions as well. So we're just going to move into the Bleacher Nation Fantasy card segment of the show, where the Bleacher Nation Fantasy app is a pick'em style game, very similar to Prize Picks or Underdog, where you can go through the entire slate of games. Every single player has a more or less on their yards or receptions or pass attempts or anything like that. You just click more or less, build out your card, play it, and win some money. So we are unfortunately on a 2-week losing streak after being on a 2-week winning streak, which I want to say that we are due for a win this week. There is a promotion right now where you get a 100% deposit match up to $500 if you use the promo code DUNK. So that is more for the start of the NBA season, but we can absolutely take advantage of it on the NFL side. Whether you're a new user or have already been playing, you can deposit money into that with the code DUNK and get up to $500 in a deposit match. So take advantage of that one. There's also a promo leg. This is for new users only on the Sunday night game for Aaron Rodgers, more than half a passing yard in that revenge game against the Packers. So if you are signing up and you are a new user, you can take advantage of that promo leg on Sunday and add it into your card that we have built out for you today. So, John, do you want to hit us with the first leg of this Bleacher Nation fantasy card for Sunday?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to my receiver sleepy starts and just Romeo Doubs, more than 49.5 receiving yards. He has 72, 55, 58 in the last 3 games. Prior to that, 25, 28, and 68. So he's cleared this in 4 of 6 games, but he's cleared it in 3 straight. So I like that. And I don't think this is really EV or whatever, EV plus or whatever you want to say. But I also like the Matthew Golden, because you're picking 2 players from the same team. If one's getting receptions, the other one's not. So it's unlikely that they're both going to hit, or less likely that they're both going to hit. But I like the Golden. You could take either the 40.5 receiving yards, which he's cleared in 3 of his last 4, or the 52.5 receiving and rush yards, because he typically has seen about 2 carries per game since week 2, except for last week where they didn't give him a handoff, which I think they will rectify this week. And that allows you a couple of ways to get to that 52.5 number. So 40.5 or 52.5, depending on what you want to play there. I don't know if you should do both of these, but if you like one guy or the other, I do like both plays.
My play this week is DeAndre Swift, more than 58.5 rushing yards. He's hit this in 3 out of 6 games this year. In another game, he was at 53, so he's over in 3 and just near it on a 4th one. But he's been over 100 in each of the past 2 weeks as this Chicago Bears offense and run game and offensive line seems to have really started to gel. And I believe both of those games are coming after their bye week as well. So there might be a little bit of a bye week sort of fix or gelling, as I mentioned, for the Chicago Bears. They get a matchup against the Baltimore Ravens, which the Ravens have a pretty weak defense, both against the run and against the pass. And from what it sounds like right now, it does not seem like Lamar Jackson is really going to play this week. And I think we're still waiting on, potential confirmation on that, but it doesn't sound like Lamar is really going to play. And if he does not play, then I think that DeAndre Swift is a great bet to get over this number, because the Bears are going to be winning for the majority of that game. And if he does play, it could lead into more of a shootout where DeAndre Swift is in kind of a neutral game situation, where they're going to just have to give the ball to him as many times as they possibly can just to try to win. Are you seeing something different on Lamar? You kind of...
Yeah, he's back at practice. I made a face at you. Your information, I don't know. He's back at practice on a Wednesday after a bye, so I'm putting him in the rankings. He might not make it, but I'm not seeing anything where he's probably not going to play. If he didn't practice yesterday, I would agree with you. But coming out of the bye, limited yesterday, I think he's trending towards it, but there's certainly the possibility of a setback or something with him. But to me, I think he's looking like 70-80% going to play.
I think I fall victim to clickbait headlines without actually reading the articles, where they're just like, "Oh my gosh, Lamar is not going to play this week."
Don't fall victim today. Yeah, don't follow people like that.
I don't follow them. They just pop up on my. They just pop up.
You got to go.
Feed,
you got to do your not the for you. You got to do the following tab.
I don't know. I don't know if Lamar Jackson plays this week. I'm going to end it on that one. I'm not 100%.
Let's do a friendly wager.
I mean, if he plays this week, that's fine. I have him in a couple of leagues. I would love to have him back. But regardless of all of this, DeAndre Swift, more than 58.5 rushing yards. I think that's a pretty good line against a weak Ravens defense that is pretty bad against the run. And he's hit this. He's been over 100 yards in each of the last 2 games. And I think that the Bears are starting to figure out what they're doing offensively. So I like that leg. I like Romeo Doubs, more than 49.5 receiving yards. I also like Matthew Golden, more than 40 receiving, or the 52.5 receiving and rushing, as you mentioned, for both of them. So that is going to round out today's episode with our Week 8 sneaky starts and our Bleacher Nation fantasy card for the Week 8 Sunday slate. So good luck to everybody out there for playing during the Bye-pocalypse this week. I hope you all win all of your matchups and setting all of your starting lineups using some of these sneaky starts that we have highlighted for you today. We will catch you guys next week for Week 9 sneaky starts. And see you all next time on the Most Accurate Podcast. Peace.